Yeah, good day, everyone, from wherever you are on the planet Earth. Yeah, this is the Titan 24-hour online global conference extended. And yeah, you can see that we're having another super guest to come and do a presentation for us today. So I'm going to be introducing in shortly. So let me just do a bit of a commercial again. Yeah, so we are live. You're welcome, everybody. And Karen, you're welcome. So come on, we are having an extended 24-hour session. And it's like it's turning into, oh my goodness, what are they doing? So you're welcome, Karen.
Thank you very much. So glad to be here and glad to see the viewers, and I'll be monitoring the chat if you have any questions.
Absolutely. So we have an awesome person here, and he's going to be telling us a whole lot of things that perhaps has been very new to a whole lot of people in terms of education. When you talk about large-scale assessments, how do you really get the research done? What happens? So his organization is a master. In fact, I went through the history and I discovered that the IEA and the IEP were the first set of organizations that ever thought of doing anything large-scale assessments in the 1950s. So we have the grandmasters of learning system level learning assessments across the world right here with us. So you're welcome, Rolf.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, Karen.
Yeah, exactly. So we're glad you're able to make it. We had unusual with timing. I think it got to a time that Karen and I became time challenged. So we couldn't fix the time properly. And and Rolf too didn't get his information in time and all that. So, but we agreed that he's going to definitely come and present this very special one on learning assessments and the IEA, and he agreed, and that's why he's here. So, Rolf, we're glad to have you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, okay, you want to say something before I pull up your presentation?
No, well, I think I can just get started.
Oh, great. Yeah, so I'm going to pull up your presentation, then we're going to be backstage to monitor things. You can go ahead, Rolf.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, hello, everybody. My name is Rolf Strietholt, and I'm the co-head of the Research and Analysis Unit of the IEA. And I'm based in Hamburg, Germany. And I and my colleagues, we are working on international student assessments. That means we are testing students all around the world, and we compare how they perform in order to learn from each other. And that was the basic idea when our organization was established, now more than 60 years ago. We wanted to learn from each other how to design educational systems, and then to see how students perform all around the world, to learn from each other. Let me give you a brief overview of the presentation. There are basically two things that I would like to provide today, and that is first an overview of our work, what we do at the IEA. That is basically our studies that we are conducting. And then the second part of the presentation will be focusing on one particular study, and that is a computer study, ICILS. It is actually also the study we have reported on most recently. And now after COVID-19 and everything about digital learning, it's also kind of an interesting study in these days. But let me start with the IEA as an organization. So the IEA is an international organization, and we have members. Countries are our members, and they are listed here. What you can see is that this is a truly international organization, although we have a few regions on the world that are still underrepresented. And I actually would kindly invite all representatives from countries that are not yet members of the IEA to consider to become members, because it's a really good opportunity to participate in our studies and to move education forward. I think our organization is best described by our studies, and we have currently 4 flagship studies that we are conducting. The first is the TIMSS study that has started in 1995, and since then we have repeated it every 4 years. A second study is the PIRLS study that is started in 2001, and we have 2 more recent studies, ICCS, ICILS. They have been introduced in 2009 and 13. And I will now talk about each of these studies and introduce them to you. They all have in common is that they are student assessments. So we go to different countries and test students. In addition to that, we also survey in further information about the educational systems, about classrooms, about schools. So we administrate questionnaires for principals, students, parents, teachers, and to national research coordinators or specialists of the different countries to collect information about the educational systems. Let me start with our actually largest study, the TIMSS study. TIMSS stands for Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study. And the title or the name of the study already indicates that it is about 2 core domains, 2 core subjects, and that is mathematics and science. We are testing students in a 4-year cycle. So we have now 24 years of trend data. The results of the latest cycle will be published soon, in December 2020. Important for TIMSS is that we test students at different grade levels. We test students at the end of primary school, which is typically grade 4, and then again in grade 8 to collect information on different educational levels. In TIMSS 19, we had more than 60 countries participating. They are listed here. What you can see is that this is really a worldwide collection of countries, and we have good comparative information to provide the performance of one country in context to others. The information that we have collected throughout the last 24 years can be used to place students on a scale. So what you see here is just a small selection of countries and how they performed on the TIMSS test. What you see on the top performing country, one of the top performing countries is Singapore, Korea, Japan. So these East Asian countries. However, what you can also use the data for is to look at trends. And what you see here now is how the performance of the countries has changed over time. So countries receive a measure about how they perform and whether their performance has improved or decreased over the years, and they can use this information to evaluate educational policies and monitor the developments. The full report of TIMSS 19 will be released soon, on December 8 in 2020. Please look at our media channels. I will show them later to see the results and to follow the release of the results. I would like to introduce you to a new current IEA study, and that is the PIRLS study. PIRLS stand for Progress in International Reading Literacy Study, and it is about reading literacy. We test students in grade 4 at the end of primary school. Right now, we are in the preparation of the next cycle in 21, and by then we will have data for over 20 years. So again, trend data that can be used to see how countries develop over time. There will be a new digital PIRLS assessment option where students are tested with this online assessment or an electronic assessment system. Worldwide, more than 56 countries participated in PIRLS. So you see, again, this is a huge study that can be used to monitor your country's performance and to put it in context in comparison to other countries. Just like in TIMSS, the data can be used to trace the mean performance level in different countries. What we see here, for example, is a handful of countries that performed at different levels in 2001. But when we look at trends, we see that there is quite some dramatic change in the performance levels. Those countries that were performing very well at an early stage may have experienced a decline over the years and then also an incline again. But I think the most striking finding from this graph here is the huge variation in how countries develop over time. We have two more current IEA studies, and here we shift the focus a bit from school core subjects like math, reading, and science to other domains that are more across subjects. And this study, ICCS, is the International Civic and Citizenship Education Study. Right now, we are preparing the next cycle in 22. It follows two earlier cycles in 09 and in 16. In ICCS, we test students and survey students about their civic knowledge and attitudes towards democracy and other related concepts. In ICCS 2016, we had 24 countries that participated in the study. The countries come from Latin America, from Europe, and from Asia. What we can see when we look at the change in civic knowledge since 2009 is a rather good finding that most of the countries that participated in both cycles improved their performance over 7 years. So the civic content knowledge has increased in most countries. In contrast, there are only a few countries where we observe a decrease, and that is not even statistically significant. So these are good news from a civic perspective. Last not least, and I would like to spend a bit more time on this study, I would like to introduce you to the ICILS study. ICILS stands for International Computer and Information Literacy Study. And the last cycle was in 2018. The results have recently been published, and I would now like to spend a little more time on this study. Altogether, 14 countries or educational systems participated in this study. You can see them listed here. So when we have data from 14 countries, that implies that in each country we sampled schools, students, teachers. In ICILS, we have 150 schools that teach grade 8 students, and they were chosen at random in each country. Altogether, 2,200 schools worldwide. And then altogether, we have almost 50,000 students worldwide. 20 students per schools were sampled so that we achieved this huge number of students that were tested and surveyed in ICILS. And then we have teacher information. Teacher information is key information because teachers are those that are delivering learning contents to their students. And in ICILS, we drew a random sample of 8th grade teachers, of 15 8th grade teachers, so that altogether we have a sample of 26,000 teachers worldwide. What are we testing in this study? Basically, in ICILS, we test two different domains, computer and information literacy, and computational thinking. CIL, Computer and Information Literacy, focuses on developing young people as effective consumers and producers of digital information. Do bear in mind that ICILS is the only international study that measures also the productive component of using ICT. So what we are testing is whether students can actually use computers to produce something. I will show you something more on that in a minute. The second component that we are testing becomes more and more important in recent years, and that is CT, computational thinking. Computational thinking focuses on developing young people to be effective problem solvers with digital technologies. Computational thinking is the type of thinking that is used when programming on a computer or a digital device. So we can now look at the computational thinking test more in detail. And what we see is that this competence is composed of different components. The first is decomposition. That means breaking down a problem into easy to solve chunks. Then we have pattern recognition. Pattern recognition is, well, fairly self-explanatory. Then we have abstraction. And last not least, algorithms. So these are the different components that we are testing when we test computational thinking. I would also like to give you some information how we test that, the test format. So we have a computer and information literacy module, and that is composed of 2 blocks, each taking 30 minutes. So the students are tested 2 times 30 minutes on computer and information literacy. Thereafter, we administrate a student questionnaire that takes about 30 minutes. And then we have the computational thinking modules. They take 2 times 25 minutes. Note that the computational thinking module was optional in ICILS, so not all countries participated in this module. Each module that takes about 30 minutes involves 5 to 8 small tasks and 1 large task. The large task is more demanding and takes 10 to 20 minutes. In addition to the student information, we have the teacher questionnaire that takes 30 minutes for each teacher. We have a principal questionnaire that takes 15 minutes and an ICT coordinator. So the coordinator is responsible for computers and IT at the respective schools. Let me give you a summary of the computer and information test module. What does it look like? I already told you that we are not surveying information about whether students feel proficient in using computers, but we are actually testing them. So almost 50,000 students around the world took this test, and here are just these 5 modules that were used. Let me give you some examples of what the students did in these tests. One module is band competition. Band competition, well, that is about students planning a website. They edit an image and they use a simple website builder to create a web page with information about a school band competition, so music bands. Another example of this test is school trip. In this test module, students help to plan a school trip using an online database tool, and they select and adapt information to produce an information sheet about the trip for their peers. And they have to use different tools. So that's basically what our tests look like. And here are the findings. Well, the ranking. In my opinion, it's not very interesting, but people usually want to see that. But what I rather want you to focus on is the black lines, and they show the interquartile range. So that is basically the variation within countries. So what you see from this graph is that there's not only huge variation in terms of the performance level across countries, but also within countries. Students do better and worse even in the same country. Digital natives. So these days we frequently talk about digital natives, but what we find in ICLS that this is not equal to digital experts. Even though our youth now grows up with digital devices, they are not really experts in the digital world. We can divide the computer and information literacy scale into different levels. And that is what you can see right here. Students working at level 1, they demonstrate a functional working knowledge of computers as tools, and they have a basic understanding of the consequences of computers being accessed by multiple users. Examples are, for example, you can open a link in a new browser tab. You can identify who receives an email by carbon copy. Or students at that level can insert an image into a document. Now, 25% of the students reach this level. They are basic users. But, and that is important, 18% are even below this basic level. Students working at level 2, they can use computers to complete basic and explicit information gathering and management tasks. For example, they can add contacts to a collaborative workspace. They can navigate to an URL presented as plain text, and so forth. We found 36% of the students in this level. Now, we also have the highest level, and that is actually what we would expect if students are actually digital natives, that they achieve a high level of computer literacy. But we found that only 2% of all students tested in ICLS achieve this high level where they are really proficient users of computers. Well, we can also look at the data from a different perspective, and that is an inequality perspective, the digital divide. When looking at the computer and information literacy score, we observed that girls outperform boys by large. And this was consistent across countries. The result for the computational thinking domain was different. Internationally, male students performed better than female students. Well, but only very little. Looking at the country level, boys performed better in Portugal, the US, North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany, where girls did better in Finland. In all other countries, there were no statistically significant differences. Indeed, in Denmark, the average score was exactly the same. Bear in mind, we measure with quite high levels of precision. Higher socioeconomic status measured by parental occupation, parental education, or, and this works still well as an indicator, the number of books at home, is related to students' computer and information literacy scores in 10 out of 10 countries. and the differences are huge. Now we also collected information with the background questionnaires. So ICT in learning and teaching. There are some quite interesting findings. How are digital devices used? 2 out of 10 students reported daily use of computers at school for school-related purposes. But, and this is interesting, 3 out of 10 students reported daily use of computers at school for non-school related purposes. So there's still quite some room for improvement. On the other hand, 2 out of 10 students reported daily use of computers outside the school for school-related purposes. But, and that may not surprise, 7 out of 10 students report daily use of computers outside school for other purposes. Now, there is a myth that bringing digital devices and modern software to schools will change teaching, and new innovative forms of teaching will be introduced to schools. What we observed is the most frequent use of ICT is computer-based information resources, word processing software, and presentation software. New and really innovative teaching with modern software is visible in less than 10% of the teaching. And with this, I would like to close my presentation, and I would be happy to answer your questions or comments. Thank you.
There we go. Okay. So interesting. There were several points that you brought up that I wanted to address. I noticed that the U.S. wasn't in your list on several of your studies that you went over, but I wish we were. I've done a little bit of research that was my area when I was getting my degree. It was really interesting about how the girls and boys performed differently, and then in some countries they were the same. Was that Belgium? They were the same, or no, Denmark?
Yes.
Yes. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know in the U.S. we have
yes,
about middle school is where it changes.
Yeah.
Kids are about the same. Then boys kind of go ahead in about middle school age.
Yeah. Yes, I think this is one of the most interesting and fascinating fields where empirical data is actually needed. So for long we knew that there are gender differences in terms of schooling. And I mean, this has been studied for 200 years. In the beginning, it was more about the access to education, of course, where only few girls had access to education, but that has luckily changed in many regions around the world, not everywhere though. But so even if we established gender equality in the access of education, that doesn't imply that boys and girls perform equally well. And what we feel now is that there is inequality in terms of what boys and girls or males and females are studying at university, for example. And what we were able to show in our studies is that gender inequality exists even at an early stage, but not really in favor of boys, but mostly for girls. And what we see is that girls perform better in reading all around the world, but not in mathematics and science. There they perform about at the same level. So what we see from our studies is that it is not really schooling that causes different choices. It is not ability that girls are worse in math or in science, but it's more a matter of choice or of other instances that they do not choose to study these subjects later.
Very interesting. Yes, I agree. And I know that many of the times they are learning not from their school, they're learning from their friends on here. So the education comes from their social circles. And I suppose if it's not valued in their social circles, well, let me say this. What's valued in their social circles is what they're going to learn and what they're interested in.
Yes. So, I mean, that also, when I just summarized some findings that we observed in our studies, I think they just assist policymakers in finding where we can change certain things and to identify the areas where we need to improve education, or what are the points where we can actually make a difference, and where do we already establish some types of equality.
Great. Where can our viewers get information and keep an eye out for when these studies are concluded, or at least this round of studies? How can we find out?
There are different sources. I think we are very active on social media. So what you see here now is that at IEA _education on Twitter, you can find information on new studies when they are released. We follow an open access policy at the IEA. You can just follow our website, iea.nl, and there we publish all the reports of our studies. So they are available for free, and you can read what we have done. The same holds for older studies, and there's additional information provided on our reports.
That is fabulous. That's great. I know that a lot of my scholarly friends are interested in this kind of research. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
I think I have a question as well also. Yeah, this was a very good presentation, and it's kind of like an eye-opener. You mentioned about the 4 studies that the IEA is actually involved in right now. But I would want you to, if it's possible, if you have some little information, insight to that. LANA is something that is a lower study, perhaps before you admit people to the TIMSS and PIRLS and all that. So can you say something a bit about LANA, because there are a whole lot of countries that are outside the 4 studies that you talked about, that the IEA starts to work with them with LANA.
Yeah. So yes, you're right. So what I have introduced today was an overview of our international studies, in which, in theory, all countries can participate. But there are some, we also involved in some regional initiatives. Actually, we also support some countries, some individual countries, in establishing an assessment system, for example, in analyzing data on their countries. And we provide different kinds of consultancy. Indeed, there's an entire capacity building unit in the IEA. And LANA is one project I'm really excited about, because what we learned over the years when doing this international assessments is that it is sometimes difficult to compare all countries. There are sometimes different cultures, and I mean, this becomes from one perspective visible when looking at civic education, for example. They are just different political systems, and it's we have to adjust our studies to the needs of the individual countries. And actually, that's also one of our principles. We try to develop studies together with the countries to meet the countries' needs. And now LANA is a project where we try to get more involved in Africa, where we try to establish assessment systems and in Africa, where we try to adjust some existing studies to the specific needs in countries, well, in Africa, about numeracy, for example, or literacy, and we try to adjust these assessment systems that we have developed to the specific needs. And I mean, you can just think about the things that are just presented to you with the samples. We sometimes go to countries and assume that there are schools and then there are several classrooms. They are organized by different grades, but that is not everywhere the case. There are some countries where we have just more rural areas where we need to find assessment systems that meet the structure of the school when students of different ages are mixed in a classroom, when the classrooms are very large. And this is what we do. We go to the countries and talk to them, and we try to develop then assessments that meet the requirements the countries have, but still try to establish comparability between the different countries. So that is also something we learned. It's not necessarily meaningful to compare an East Asian country to a Latin American country, or a Central European country to an African country. What is much more useful are comparisons about countries that are more alike, neighboring countries that share values, culture, and so forth. And so, this liner that you mentioned, that is just one approach to meet that demand.
Okay, yeah, that's good. And coupled with that, because a lot of countries would need to understand that this is very important right now, as education post-COVID. Now, education doesn't have to be the same, because you need to really have access to primary data to be able to do effective planning. Trying to assume the number of out of school children or whatever, it doesn't fit any longer. So, and I think that's one of the things that Lana could actually help countries with. So I wanted to say, you have, for COVID, you have responses to educational disruption survey. So can you say something about that? Right.
Yes, so that is the latest initiative that we have been involved in, that we are planning right now. So the RED study is a study where we try to collect information on how countries responded to the school lockdown around the world. Earlier this year, starting in February, almost all countries around the world closed their schools. I think the UNESCO estimated that 90% of the students had to stay at home. And in the beginning, we thought that this would just last for a week or two. But over the month, we learned that this is something that will really last for longer periods. And now countries had to find different approaches to deal with that. And with the RED study that we are conducting together with UNESCO and the European Commission, we try to develop, or we are actually developing, a survey where we collect information, how countries have responded, and we want to identify successful strategies. Again, we had to be creative in developing the instruments, because countries responded quite differently to this education disruption. In some countries, I can just tell you, they were trying to set up learning platforms, very sophisticated tools where students learned at home at their computers. Teachers could assign tasks to their students. In other countries, that was not possible. We have countries that are now participating in the RED study where only 30% of the people have access to electricity. So there's really variation in how countries had to respond to the school lockdown, and we try to collect information so that different countries can learn from each other.
Okay, yeah, I got a very interesting question for you by one of our participants. He said, I'm going to put it on so that you see it. He said, is there any research on impact of emotion quotient on students' IQ? like emotional quotient on the student IQ. So what would you say about that?
So there's no research from the IEA on this issue. However, what we try to assess in IEA studies, we try to narrow our, we try not to narrow our focus on achievement only, but we also try to assess further information on well-being, or on the other hand, on bullying. And this is information that we are collecting in our studies. We collect information on whether students are motivated to learn, if they like reading or mathematics. And this is not exactly emotional quotient, but it is somehow related information. I'm a bit hesitant now to make to draw any inferences about causal relationships between the two, but actually studying this is something that you can do with our data. And I didn't mention it earlier. I just told you that we have this open access policy where we publish our study reports, but you can also download our data. It's all for free, and you can use it. You can download it from our website and then use it. We provide trainings how to use the data. There are videos on site, online. We have user guides. You can approach us and use the data yourself to study questions that you have.
That's pretty interesting, because after this session, we are going to have online conflict and violence online in online classroom. And that aspect is, well, I wouldn't preempt what the presentation is going to be, but that aspect is really going to be something that will be so important now that a whole lot of institutions and countries are actually moving to online classroom. And I think your data is going to really help be able to get some informative decision about that. And what would you say to countries that have not started to perhaps make use of studies like this, specifically as you really dealt on the computer-related study in your presentation? What would you say to them, and how would you kind of like, if you want to sound convincing that, okay, yeah, now you're going on online, digital, so that's why you really need this? What would you say?
Yes, I think basically why countries should participate in our studies is that if you want to base your decisions, how to organize your country, your educational systems on evidence, you need data to do that. And I think what we are really good in is collecting this data. We have developed over the past 60 years quality standards and procedures, and we have developed the knowledge how to conduct proper assessments that can provide you valid and reliable information. So if you want to improve the education in your system, then you need the data to research it, and we can help you getting this data.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Rolf. Karen, you still have some additional questions?
No questions, but really I'm going to dig deeper and go to the IEA site and check this out. I was really happy to see that you mentioned that the research is downloadable and that you have tutorials and instructions on how to use it, and it's very exciting, and I'm excited to go do that right now.
Yeah. So, Rolf, thank you for doing this. Now, I know a whole lot of people have really been enlightened about the essence of actually going for the data to be able to do an analysis right now. And in fact, you can't have it more at a better time than this, when a whole lot of things, we're in a bubble, and so many things are just not the normal thing that we know. So you can't, one thing is this, institutions, governments, name it, you can't use what you have known before now to be able to solve the problem that we have right now.
Yeah.
It's just like the very common saying that's attributed to Albert Einstein, that you can't use the same idea that you keep using to solve a different problem. So you have to have a totally different outlook to it. So now, and to really have a different outlook, it's important to make use of valid data, make informed decision. And what a way to make informed decision than for you to sit down with those that have actually are masters at it. And IEA, I've actually gone through a whole lot of information about the IEA, and I know they are experts in that, not just because they wanted to give you data, but they are going to really give you some analysis that's going to really be very, very useful, either at the country level or at the regional level, because I know for sure that everyone needs this right now. Relatively, a whole lot of countries have not opened because they are confused. They don't know what to do, and it's not it's not an issue not to know what to do. It's kind of like an issue when you don't know where to go to get help and assistance. And that is really why I love the fact that IEA had to come and do a presentation, so that so many people will kind of like, okay, yeah, this is possible. Now you told us that the data is available. People can actually go download it for free, learn from others. And I think the REDS program is still ongoing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and countries can actually log into it, and they'll receive some form of assistance to actually get some of those things, and they will start up somewhere. It's very, very important to start. So thank you, Rolf, for a great time. Today we are really, really glad that you're able to like do this. Yeah. So
thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So quickly before we end the broadcast for this session, we have, I've mentioned about it before now, we have this coming up shortly: conflict and violence in online classroom. What does that mean, and how do you really want to manage your online classroom going further? This is going to be a very, very juicy presentation, information and interactive session. So you have to tell more teachers to actually join. We're going to start at the top of the hour, so that you'll be able to understand what are the things that are in place right now. You face to face, you can take all the decisions about, okay, yes, some students, you have all the measures in place, but when it comes to online, do you really know what is going on behind your screen? There's a whole lot of questions that we need to unravel. So now we will have that at the top of the hour. So you already saw the link there. We're going to share it. And please join us, and we will be glad that you will be able to learn so much. So this is our Teachathon Conference Extended. So, and we're excited that you're able to join us. So Karen, hope you're looking forward to the next session.
Oh, absolutely. I'll be tuning in. Thank you for the link.
Exactly.
Thank you,
right.
Rolf.
So thank you, Rolf, for really doing this, and we appreciate you coming on. And this has been Rolf from the IEA's co-head of research and analysis at the International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement. So that's quite a long name, but it's we call it the IEA. Yeah. So, and we're excited to have him. So meet us at the next session, and bye-bye for now.